Hello and welcome to yet another aga-cad's webinar on framing with model groups in Revit. My name is Pavlas, I'm BIM application engineer here at aga-cad. So today we're going to concentrate on timber framing and using some of the functionality from wall plus, floor plus and roof plus. But also all of the same functions would be applied to metal framing as well. Generally speaking, in aga-cad we create applications for Autodesk Revit users based on the needs of the world leading BIM practitioners. So we do concentrate a lot on timber and metal framing, which you're going to see today at today's webinar. Our task is to eliminate stress, whether that's sort of reducing manual handling of objects and sort of generally optimizing sort of design and pre-manufacturing processes in Revit. aga-cad has recently joined the European Digital Transformation Leader Icons, and we are glad to announce that to our clients, and I believe that will be a great benefit to both us and our existing and future clients. So we offer world's widest range of applications for Autodesk Revit. Like I said, today we're going to take a look at timber framing, and all of the same principles will apply for metal framing as well. And in front of your screen, you see all the products that we have available, and predominantly you see that timber and metal framing take up the most part of our portfolio of products. We also have been recognized by Autodesk as a leading BIM solution, and we are an official Autodesk partner as well. Okay, so looking at wood and metal framing, so we have for both of those sort of categories, we have a collection of tool sets available. So both wood and metal framing suite are ideal for any scale and typology of projects. So whether you're dealing with a small scale residential or large scale industrial projects, you will find that timber and metal framing will definitely be very helpful in your day-to-day work. So what you can do, among many things, you can create detailed multi-layered prefabricated wall, roof or floor elements for Revit models. You can frame those elements a lot faster than you would normally do by hand, if you will. You can auto-distribute structural framing elements. You can produce shop drawings, number elements in the project to get accurate schedules when the time comes. And also you can export to the CNC, you can export to IFC, NWC, all these various formats, and then the model this way can be shared with consultants or can be sent for manufacturing. So when it comes to multi-framing with model groups in Revit, we have developed a functionality to do exactly that for the projects that consist of repetitive prefabricated units, and then they all going to be framed identically or in a very similar or identical fashion. You can use some of the functionality from multi-framing. Of course, you will need to know Revit to some degree to be able to create model groups, and then utilize some of the wall plus, floor plus or roof plus functionality to frame those groups, types of walls, types of floors and roofs way faster. So that's the key sort of benefit of multi-framing in Revit. Again, like with anything, you can create multi-layered roof, floor, wall assemblies, split elements into sort of smaller segments. If you're using modular construction or prefabricated and built off-site construction methodology, so you can do all of that. So today, particularly, we're going to look at utilizing multi-framing and framing in groups tools for modular construction. We're going to produce some produce some wall, floor and roof frames, multi-layered frames and sheeting as well. We're gonna look at how to produce drawings and schedules for those elements which we frame. And yeah, so we're going to frame multi-layered, multi-story wall elements and sort of units of a building. Okay, so we can now look at some of the things we're going to end up with. Like I said already, we're going to see fully framed building units, modules essentially. We essentially going to have 3 types of Revit model groups representing 3 types of modules in the project. Okay, now so let's move to our Revit model and have a look what we have there. Live Revit model. So I have quite a lot of elements in this model. I have some model groups already created, views, assemblies, etc. So that's what you want to have at the beginning or before you begin any sort of framing tasks. You want to have your Revit model in place in terms of just having your geometry, walls, roofs, floors, etc. All of that should be in place. Okay, so first thing off, we have this Tools for BIM tab at the top of your Revit ribbon. And from this tab you can access Tools for BIM doc. Now the doc is important because from the doc you have access to all of your tools. So whether you're using the trial versions of some of the tools or you have purchased and do have full license of those tools, you can access all of those via the doc. I mean, you can just hide it or sort of close the doc. You can just sort of integrate into your left or right side panel. And also we do release updates regularly to the software, so updates also accessed via the doc, and all of the sort of functionality, whether it's wood framing, metal framing, all of it is here. So now I want to start using my Wall Plus to begin with. So that's my wood framing, Tools for Revit wood framing tab at the top of my Revit ribbon, and I can see all of my modules are here: floor, roof, wall, truss. So in this case I just want to pull out the Wall Plus module and have it in front of my screen, so separately from everything else. I mean, I can close the doc by this time, that's fine, I'm not going to need it anymore. Okay, so from Wall Plus user interface, you see it's quite self-explanatory. So besides find eHelp button, that's going to take you to our web page. So we can try and do that. From the web page you have access to technical documentation of a Wall Plus in this case. Same would apply for all other tools. You have some sample projects you can download, and you have also our recorded sort of archive of past webinars which you have access to, and all those recordings are placed on our YouTube channel. Okay, so you can do that at your own time. Technical documentation, sample projects as well. So if you want to start using any of the sort of trials of our software, you can just simply go to aga-cad.com, and from there, if you scroll down, you have free trial section. If you click on that, straight away it does allow you to download and install tools for .com, and from there, if you scroll down, you have free trial section. If you click on that, straight away it does allow you to download and install tools for BIM doc on your workstation. So whatever version of Revit you are using, you have all 3 of those here. You also have installations, instruction, and sort of video tutorial how to do that. Getting started page, how to use the doc, how to activate license, etc. System requirements, and all of that. So that's available on our website, as well as our product pages. But like I say, once you install tools for the doc on your workstation and go into Revit, or just open a new Revit session, you will see Tools for BIM doc tab at the top of your ribbon. Okay, so we can now go and have a look at multi-framing of that is part of a Wall Plus. It is also part of Roof Plus and Floor Plus as well. So these will work exactly the same way as I'm going to demonstrate with Wall Plus. and those are located in frame wall drop-down menu, multi-framing for wall, multi-framing for roof, and exactly the same for floor plus. Okay, so like I said, we're going to concentrate on walls at this moment. Okay, so that's my Revit model. I mean, like I said, I have 3 module types, which are my Revit model groups with different names. They are slightly different from each other. That's why I end up with 3 types. So all of those 3 types can be framed all at once. I mean, we can do it by instance and by sort of types of model groups. So I'm gonna go into that at later stages. So like I said, at the beginning, you want to have your Revit model as accurate as it can be at a certain stage of the project. If things change, so do the configurations and the framing. You can change that as you move on through the project. You can continue editing, changing any part of the configurations, and either reframing or updating your frames in the project. Okay, so now moving on with creating model groups in Revit. So right here I have 3 wall types that are also sort of different in the size. So if, for example, here I have external wall type 3, so that's 1 wall type, but the third one, or 1 out of 3 walls, is different in length. Okay, so that's my second wall 1. Again, 1 of the 3 of the walls of the same type, one of those walls is different in length, and that's going to be important when we move on to multi-framing. So we can straight away just open up the multi-framing window, and what I want to do is place all of those walls in my Revit model group. So I can select all of those walls and then go ahead and create a group. You can name it as you like, so I'm going to just name it sample module type 1, for example. So now all of those walls have been placed in the group that goes by this name, sample module type 1. So what I want to do now is that goes by this name, sample module type 1. So what I want to do now is just make a couple of copies of this model group. So I can make copies. If I copy or copy to clipboard essentially, and then I'm gonna paste those at different levels. So I'm gonna go ahead with levels 2 and 3. Okay, so same group is pasted at levels 2 and 3. And now just for clarity, I want to move those apart slightly, so when we do perform multi-framing tasks, we can see what's happening with those walls. Okay, so that's level 1, 2, and 3. Same model group with same 3 types of walls. Okay, I can also make mirror, but we can do that. Walls depending on the group type, group instance, and also if you want to filter out walls that are unique. So essentially that isn't really selecting multiple walls, that's just gonna select each wall and treat it as a unique one. And below that you have various sort of tools to help you frame walls, copy frames, update frames, delete frames, isolate selected walls, unhide walls, create assemblies for walls that are framed, and by creating assemblies we're actually creating shop drawings. So assembly would look something like this one here. Again, so that's just a sample wall wall framing and assembly here. Again, so that's just a sample wall wall framing and assembly with schedules. So that's our sort of external cladding or siding. That's our main frame with dimensions and tags and schedules, etc. So what we want to end up with is walls framed using multi-framing, and then assemblies and drawings and schedules created using again multi-framing functionality. Okay, so now if I select one model group, okay, I want to filter out model group type affects walls identity. So let's just select this one and then show identical walls, and select perhaps walls of the same type in the copies of that same model group. So I have total of 6 walls, which now depends to me what I want to do with those walls. I can already start creating frames, create my main frame for walls, create secondary frame, nailless, siding, frame all of those additional layers at once. I can also do that. I can split parts to get my layers of sheeting, paneling, insulation, and all that. So once you filter out your walls in model groups, you then decide what you want to do with those walls. So model group type affects walls identity. So the tooltip itself tells you quite a bit. When it's on, only identical walls of the same model group type will be treated as the same wall. So now we have this third wall that is exactly of the same wall type, but it's different in length, so it's now being treated as a separate wall, although it's the same wall type. So that's why we end up with 6 walls rather than 9 walls. Okay, so now if I remove the selection, model group type affects model group instance affects walls identity, and let's try and show identical walls now. Okay, we're only going to have 2 of those walls, right? And that's because those model groups, although they are of the same type, okay, the model group is of the same type, and we can see that is exactly the same type, and now it's selecting walls in the model group that is of the same instance, and these two are different in instance because they are placed on a different level. So that's on level 2 and that's on level 3, and now it's being treated as sort of unique in a way, so that walls in the group, in the model group, that are different by instance will also be different in terms of wall parameters. Okay, so that's that. And if I go just try out some, okay, select all walls. Okay, so that's another part of the. You can just go ahead and, I mean, if you want to select all the walls in the model group, you can do that by selecting all walls. That's 11 walls there. Again, you decide what you want to do with those walls. I can show identical. That's just one because it's different in length. If we select all walls are unique in model group, I can show identical. That's just one because it's different in length. If we select all walls are unique in model group, essentially you're just gonna be selecting one by one. Yeah, so that's being treated as a unique wall in this model group. If I untick that, that's just gonna scan or run through all of those walls and select. Yeah, so I'm selecting walls that are different in length, so those are exactly the same walls. Again, if I do it by instance, again I just get one wall. If I do it by type, I get all 3 of those. Okay, so that's the sort of the idea behind filtering of walls, and select those walls. We can go ahead and isolate So you kind of just working with isolated and selected walls. Okay, so now by selecting those identical walls in all three of those model groups, we can begin and frame and copy. Okay, actually before that, I want to see what happens if I make a copy of a model group and how it's going to be treated. So if I make a copy of this existing model group and make a new type, okay, and we can see what happens are filtering rules. Okay, so that's model group type 1 and the new type, and that's essentially two different types of the model group. So if we go ahead and show identical walls, okay, so that's already being excluded because it's a different model. And I guess you could say multi-framing is working or is filtering and performing tasks for per one Revit model group. So once you duplicate or change the name, that already becomes a different model group. Okay, so that's okay. So we now can try to frame and copy update in identical walls. So essentially that allows you to select one wall, asking which of the framing configurations you want to use. So we're now going to frame one wall from this model group, and once the framing is done, well, it's actually not just framing, it's numbering and most likely splitting parts. So once we frame one wall, because we not just framing, we're also copying and updating in identical walls, it's going to do exactly that. So we have 14 walls left, 15 in total, and that's going to copy those frames into all of the identical walls in our model group. That is, again, those are just copies of the same model group. Yeah, so we have that. That's didn't take too long, and we have wall frames in all. Okay. Okay, so we also can just select a wall and use wall plus interface rather than multi-framing. So I want just to select one wall. I mean, I could just go ahead and select show identical two walls, which is fine. Okay, that's fine. We have two walls. What I'm going to do is use this frame wall command from wall plus menu. So rather than using frame and copy, you can just use frame wall. It does exactly the same. Okay, we see numbering is also being done, not just framing. Okay, so I have those two walls framed. So what I want to do now is copy and update frames in identical walls. Okay, so typically at the bottom left corner you have an instruction telling you what you expect it to do. So now it just says copy those wall frames, and well, that just copied into the other one. But if we select the filtering rule and again go copy and update, select this one wall, it's now gonna recognize all the identical walls in other instances of the same group and then copy those wall frames to other 4 walls. Okay, so we can also just go ahead and select all walls in the model group. We can just go ahead and delete the frames just like that. I guess we could just do it for all 3 of those groups, and we're gonna see some other functionality. Okay, so we can now just go ahead and try to just select one wall. Let's try and frame it. Okay, and now we want to copy and update frames in model groups. So it's going to copy all frames from selected model group into identical walls from the same model group. Okay, tooltip says select a group, and it simply does give you a report, how many walls have been framed and counted, etc. So that's another way, another sort of workflow of doing exactly sort of same tasks. It just again depends on filtering and how you want to frame walls. If you have what happens when I make any sort of change to the wall frame. So for example, I'm gonna edit this wall by instance and change the spacing of my studs, for example, and the spacing, so first last type. Click OK. So that's gonna take effect immediately. Okay, those haven't changed though. So how do I sort of roll out this change to all other remaining walls that are identical? So I can go ahead and update frames in identical walls. Again, select a wall, opening or any element of the frame. Select any element from this wall frame, and that's gonna update all of the, well, only the two walls in this case. So as you see, all of the, well, only the two walls in this case. So as you see, the two walls have been updated. Okay, so what if we now want to add additional layers to our wall framing? So if we just select this wall, for instance, go to Wall Plus Interface, we can add additional framing layers, in this case nailers and external timber cladding or siding. So we perform this for one wall. And we can see that we do have elements generated and in place. So we want to roll out this additional framing layers to all identical walls. I mean, there are again a couple of ways we can select all of the three of those walls with multi-framing and perform those tasks. We can select a frame element, it's telling me. So that's going to recognize and sort of copy those two additional layers to other two walls. So that's also quite a sort of efficient workflow for dealing with large amount of walls. Okay, so now I want to create assemblies for identical walls. So I want to select this wall type and instance, and that's the same in all three model groups. So before that, I want to number my walls. So I want to make sure that my walls in the project are going to contain mark parameter. So all of the three walls have different mark parameter because these are sort of unique walls in the project, but these are of the same model group and of the same sort of setup. Okay, so wall numbering is done. I can go ahead and create assemblies for identical walls. Okay, it's telling me to select a wall, which I'm just going to go ahead and select this one. Use the shop drawing configuration, which is in this case is just a sample shop drawing configuration. You can edit this, you can save it, you can duplicate and create your own, just like with all other configurations in aga-cad software. In this case, I'm creating 4 views with specific view templates, dimension rules, and tags assigned already. So I'm just going to go ahead and create assembly for this one wall, but it's also going to create assemblies for the 2 identical ones as well. So you can see it's creating 1 of 3 wall frame assemblies. Applying assembly sheet template. Okay, that's wall 73, I believe that was. And the other 2 are being done a lot faster. So now if I switch to see just original, and the other 2 are being done a lot faster. So now if I switch to see just original, and I can highlight primary and secondary assemblies, or just the primary. And now this wall has become Revit assembly wall 73 with certain parameters over here. So that's a primary assembly because that's the one I clicked on, and that has become primary. And the two other ones are secondary assemblies. Okay, so show primary assembly. It just takes me to the primary one, which in this case is actually this one. Sorry, I may be mistaken. Is actually the original here, and I believe that's because I made copies. That's the original sort of model group, and these are two copies of the same model group. So it seems like that it doesn't depend on which one you click first. It depends on okay. So all of the assemblies that we have just created, both primary and secondary. Show primary takes me to the primary, even though I select any of the other wall assemblies, takes me to the primary one. That's fine. So wall 73, that's my primary assembly. Okay. I have drawings here, so we need to number elements also to get our tags working and schedules filled in. So numbering elements can also be performed by. Okay, so we can now move on to looking at sort of a larger sort of context of multi-framing. So I have these three modules. So in this case, these are module type 1, 2, and 3. So I have these three modules laid out in here. As you can see, those are modeled. So one wing of the building has already been framed, and now this part of the building is still missing the frame. So like we've discussed so far, we can use multi-framing functionality. So whichever way you decide to filter the walls, if you decide, I mean, so keep in mind those units are not mirrored, these are just copies. So whether you mirror, you can get the exact same result for your wall frames. But in this case, we're just gonna frame those copies of three different all walls in the model group. Okay, we have all the wall frames generated for this one model group. Just keep in mind, when you select walls of different types in the model group and you frame those at once, the reason why the menu came up to asking me which of the configurations I want to use, because I had multiple configurations. So we have three wall types, and each of the wall type has its different configuration assigned. That's why it's asking me which of the framing configurations I want to use for all of the walls of the same type. So keep in mind, because if you want to retain the original configuration which you have attached, you best just to frame walls by type, because each wall type has its different configuration frame, okay, and that's fixed. So it's best, I guess, just to do it by wall types and not framing multiple wall types at once. Okay, so we can now take this module type 1 that's already framed and copy update frames in all the same module type copies and instances. So we can see it's walls are already being populated with framing. So I think we have 10 instances, I believe, and 12 walls per each copy. So that's module type 1, by the way. can also frame wall by wall in the module in the model group, and then use that copy update frames in model groups. So with this unit I've done all at once. I mean, you can do it one by one and then perform copy update in all the same model groups. There's another way. So that's module type 1, model group, copied, updated, count of model groups, instances, 13. Okay, so that's, I believe, total. Frames were copied, so we had updated model groups. We have a total of 13 model group instances of module type 1. So these are 8 over here, and a couple of, or 4 that were mirrored over there. So the frames weren't updated for the mirrored ones. So count of module type 1. So these are 8 over here, and a couple of, or 4 that were mirrored over there. So the frames weren't updated for the mirrored ones. So count of skipped mirrored model groups into 4. So those 4 weren't updated, but those 8 over here were updated. So with mirrored groups, we will have to again utilize the framing in groups for mirrored items. But for these 8 modules, we have 48 frames created. So that's the breakdown of what has happened with our wall frames, and that's already there. So didn't take too long, and we have those done. And that's, I believe, this one is model group 2, and that's our model group 3. Okay, so that's kind of done already. Model group 2. Okay, so we can do also by filtering out the walls and framing them separately. If we want to do that, I mean, you can use native Revit tools, just deselect 3 walls. Okay, you can just go ahead and frame those from the Wall Plus menu. And all the same functionality applies that we already discussed. Okay. It would be exactly the same for your floors. So if I want to go and pull out Floor Plus multi-framing, okay, exactly the same menu. Have a bunch of floors as well. Okay, so I can just go ahead and filter out identical floors by instance or by type. Okay, right? I can, or actually, can go ahead. Select this floor, frame it, and automatically copy frames into remaining identical floors, of which we have another, is it 8 in total? Yeah, so another 7 floors. Okay, those floors are done. Now we have those over here. Can go ahead. Okay, those floors are done. Now we have those over here. Can go ahead and select the floors, frame those. Again, it's to ask me which of the configurations I want to use, because the 2 floors are different type floors and use different configurations. So I can either do it one by one or type by type, or I can just do all of them at once and select same configurations for both floor types. Okay, again, you have a breakdown of what happened with floor frames. And there it is. I mean, continuing framing in this way, you can add additional layers, split parts as well to get your sheeting and paneling for your walls and floors. For example, like here, we have all these additional layers added. So we can continue in this way and get all of our sort of layers. So we could actually go ahead and go into multi-framing for walls, select walls in the model, and we could split parts for those 10 walls. Essentially, by splitting parts, we're going to get our sheeting layers generated. Floor setup, but yeah, so we have our layers of sheeting in place. Okay. So that's pretty much it for multi-framing and framing groups with wall plus, floor plus, roof plus, exactly the same like I said before. And just to overview the project, we have our framing elements distributed. I mean, we used Truss Plus to generate roof trusses for those elements, and yeah, so we have framing produced for our modules, if you like, that are copied and mirrored as well. Okay, so thank you for joining this webinar. It's been a pleasure showing you some of the functionality of our software. Hopefully you find it useful. Like I always say, if you have any questions, just email myself or any of my colleagues. Also, don't forget to use a trial. Try out some of the functionality. Go have a look at our YouTube page just to see some of the previous recordings or webinars. It definitely helps you to get the good understanding of the software and its capabilities. So hopefully we'll see you in the future webinars, and thank you for attending this one today. Goodbye to all.
aga-cad, building BIM together.